Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Apologies straight off the bat for the slightly iffy background, but anyone that watched last week's video knows I've just moved house, so I'm trying various walls around the house, and this one needs a little bit of a paint. So apologies, it does kind of look like I'm perhaps in the sky with some stars behind me, but no, it's just chips in the wall which needs a good paint. So apologies for that straight off the bat, but I'm not one for backboards and things like that. As you know, it's just me chatting away into the camera on my phone. So it is what it is. No frills, but there were thrills for Tottenham last night, although it didn't really end the way we all wanted it to. Such a weird game against Everton at Goodison Park. I should say, obviously, as I always do, straight off the bat, I was at the West Brom game at the stadium. But however, the way we're working right now is any games that are up north on the whole. My colleague, the King of the North, Rob Guest, my fellow Spurs correspondent, he is heading off to do those games because they're closer, and especially in the ropey weather, it kind of made sense because you're only allowed one per organisation. So I had to watch it on TV with everyone else. And it was really entertaining. It was, I think probably the way to say it is kind of everyone got their Tottenham back, but whether that's exactly what we all wanted is another thing, and we're going to come on to that. I mean, it was what it is. It is what it is. A 5-4 match can only be one thing. It can only be utter chaos, great attacking play, terrible defensive work. And this kind of had it all. I was really enthused by the start. I thought it was fantastic. Spurs really took the game straight away to Everton. Lamela header within 60 seconds or so. Lucas Moura probably should have put the rebound away. But then only, 2 minutes later, Davinson Sanchez headed the ball unmarked into the net. So it was a really good start. And Spurs' one-touch passing, attacking movement was really, really exciting to watch. And I, before the game, hold my hands up, and I was quite disappointed to not see Vinicius starting if Kane wasn't going to be, because I kind of felt they weren't going to have a focal point. But actually, full props to Mourinho, to the players. In that first 20 minutes or so, Spurs were everywhere, all over Everton, and really should have been 2 or 3-0 up, and the game probably should have been out of sight at that point. But it's kind of been a familiar tale in some games, Spurs not taking their chances. And they didn't, obviously. And we know what happened next. It was, I used that Anchorman clip for a gif of, boy, that escalated quickly, because it really did. It was obviously Pierre-Emile, who just had a really ropey off day. It kind of was a good pointer to the fact that even him, who's had such a brilliant season, needs to have a rest once in a while. And the fact that he ended up playing 2 hours is really not a good thing. But he had the off day. He gave the ball away, which to Sigurdsson, which set up Calvert-Lewin for the first goal, and then obviously you had Richarlison's second one hitting through the legs of Alderweireld, and then Højbjerg again tripping. I think it was Calvert-Lewin, wasn't it, in the bench, and then Sigurdsson put the penalty away. So suddenly Spurs 3-1 down from having played really well up to that point, which is always a kick in the nether regions, really. But what I thought was good, there was a spirit, that was there. I thought Eric Lamela, I know there's some people out there that don't like Eric Lamela, but yesterday I felt that was Eric Lamela, the very kind of the best you see of him. Fighting, inspiring the team, pushing them on, and scoring a lovely goal. Really, if Kane or Son or anyone had scored that goal, they would have had loads of credit. It was a lovely little dinked finish. No, I thought he was really good. Perhaps should have scored that early header, but he was involved in everything pretty much good that Spurs did, and they got a good old shift out of him as well before he went off. Son, obviously, I thought Son was much better. Son's been a bit quiet. Obviously, playing with more attacking threat, plays to his strengths. But 3 assists on the day was terrific for him, and that cross for Kane, the cross for Kane was just so beautifully measured from the touchline. Lovely stuff, and that's the 15th combination, I believe, between the two this season in all competitions. Just that instinct, haven't they, of playing together. And I think for Kane, that was his 209th goal. So now moving clear of Bobby Smith into that second place, and I think it's Jimmy Greaves 266, I believe he's got to get to. So he's still got a little way to go. Maybe next season, hopefully. But yeah, I felt in terms of their attacking play, it's probably the best Spurs have looked. But unfortunately, it's Tottenham Hotspur, so it comes with at a cost. And I wrote an article on this late last night, which went this morning, and it was something. It came from a comment that I said to someone last night. Was that I kind of had these visions of have you seen Gladiator? The scene where Russell Crowe's Roman general is brutally slaying people in the gladiatorial arena, and he shouts to the crowd, "Are you not entertained?" And then follows up with, "Is this not why you are here?" And it's like, it's so much of what the crowd wanted. Actually, it ends up not being what they wanted. And I just kind of had that in my head because it kind of feels like almost you'd imagine Mourinho's kind of privately is saying something along those lines. He's been criticised for Tottenham's defensive nature of their performance, especially obviously when they lose or they draw and they don't get the results they want. But it kind of, when I said earlier at the top of this, we kind of got that Tottenham back, as it were. It wasn't really a good thing because for me, while it was utterly absorbing and great fun yesterday, it ended in disappointment. And that probably, and I've said this before about the Tottenham way. The Tottenham way was, you look back to Arthur Rowe's push and run side, in the 50s, you look back to Bill Nick's fantastic double winning side. But ultimately, the Tottenham way since that point has kind of been that. Thrills and spills with not really any tangible end product. A cup side, definitely. There've been FA Cups, there's been UEFA Cups, there's been a few League Cups as well, not many obviously in recent years. But ultimately, I don't know, it reminded me a lot of, and this is quite ironic, I didn't realise this until after I thought about it. It reminded me of the 5-4 against Arsenal at White Hart Lane. Do you remember that one? I think it was Defoe scored an absolute beauty. I think I remember that was the one where he went past a few people and crashed it into the roof of the net. I think it was a Canute get 1 or 2 as well. And weirdly, I kind of when I looked at that game, I realised it was the one that Mourinho came out with a comment about it being like, it's a disgrace kind of thing. I think he said something about it, that'd be a hockey score, not a football score. And it showed that there was bad defending and stuff like that. And there's a touch of irony, obviously, because that's kind of exactly what happened yesterday. I mean, you can look at certain things. You can look at whether it really was a penalty or whether it was just outside the box. You can look at individual errors. Davinson Sanchez scored 2 goals, but actually let people in behind him quite easily yesterday. And my kind of original point, what I was saying was that is that Mourinho, I kind of feel almost like he was saying, there you go, there's your entertainment. That's what you've had for decades. You've had matches like that, which you will thoroughly enjoy and feel absolutely breathless at the end of it. But ultimately, it's never led to anything. As I always say, the last league title for Spurs 60 years ago. Even the FA Cup, now Spurs are out, it's going to be more than 30 years, which really makes me feel old. Remember in the 91 Cup final, my goodness, that was 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago. That's scary. It hasn't, and there are people that want to see just more of last night. There's a chap on Twitter earlier on said to me, I'd actually rather take watching that kind of football, thrilling football, attacking football, almost like kamikaze, a bit Ozzy Ardiles at times. The famous 5 or whatever it was, the 5 up front. And not win matches, rather than, I think the logic is people, and I understand that, would rather lose in an entertaining way than lose in a dull way. I get that. But what I would say is I think the Mourinho method over time produces consistent results. I don't think, the losses actually, when you look at the overall amount of games, aren't that many. And, don't get me wrong, you know what I've made of some of the football. Some of the football has really not been attractive or enjoyable in any way. But but I don't know, I just felt like last night was a nostalgic throwback to an era that wasn't the greatest for Spurs. It reminded me of kind of maybe, I've used an example there that obviously was during Martin Joel's time, and that's probably unfair with the Arsenal, the 5-4, because that was kind of a little bit of a freak result in a way. But it kind of reminded me of those kind of games in like the late 90s, early 2000s when Spurs were a little bit mid-tabley and would have wonderful days, would have wonderful attacking players, but ultimately wouldn't really amount to much. And I suppose for Spurs, it's about going to the next level. And yeah, it was a funny one. It was a funny game. It was one that I enjoyed, but ultimately it Spurs out of another cup. And against an Everton team that I'd actually say weren't that good on the day. Bearing in mind how I've seen Everton play in the Premier League, I don't think that was a great Everton. Obviously, they lost Calvert-Lewin as well as the match went on. So Spurs really shouldn't have lost that match. And I think, Mourinho also, he said a phrase after the game about how I asked the players, what I asked of them was to be happy in possession. He said, I want them to go out there. I want them to enjoy, essentially, their football. And you could see that. Like I said, a one-touch fast passing, lovely stuff. They really got up and down the pitch. And you kind of feel that if they could marry that with a better defence, then perhaps you maybe would get a hybrid of the two kind of methods of setting up. I think the big problem, and, it's it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work this one out, or a brain surgeon or whatever, but he just can't find that centre-back pairing that works. He's tried pretty much every centre-back pairing, I think, this season. I'm trying to think if Rodon's worked with everyone. But ultimately, none of them have really worked on a sustained basis. And last night, again, I've never been entirely comfortable with the Alderweireld and Sanchez one. It's never really felt balanced. Neither of them really like being on the left-hand side. And just, obviously he didn't have his two first choice, probably fullbacks. But I still say the centre-back is the pairing that's causing the most problems. And that then leads you down the road of, in a way, it's Mourinho sending a message to everyone, really, saying, look, this is what happens when I leave that back line exposed. They concede 5 goals against an Everton team that, didn't have James Rodriguez, didn't have Andre Gomez out there. And like I say, Calvert-Lewin came off as well. So, Man City on Saturday, you put that same defence out, my God, what's going to happen to it? So I kind of get the fact that, I've always said this in the past, I'd like to see some kind of balance of it all. I'd like to see, Spurs absolutely go for the throat of teams that they shouldn't have to sit back and counter against. But then on the flip side, I want to see this more intelligent, clever Tottenham that we've seen against City, that we've seen against United, that we've seen against Arsenal as well, that can sit back, soak up, but then absolutely counter with breathtaking pace and speed and exciting attacking football in that respect. But I just think we're just seeing more and more that this defence, he cannot get it to click. And that must be incredibly frustrating for a guy that's based a lot of his career on very rock-solid defences. And, you've got Ledley King in there working with them, and João Sacramento's no slouch as a coach either. So just to consistently see these individual errors, I saw people after the game, and I get that sometimes you can just get a little bit sick of stuff, but I saw Jose out and stuff like that, which, not that I totally understand it after other games, but I kind of understand it if Spurs had played in the way that people have been criticising and they lost, comfortably or whatever against someone without really having a go. But last night's match, I can't pin the blame on Mourinho, and I really struggle to see how others can, even with the way he'd set them up. Had they taken their chances and not committed silly errors at the back, they should have won that game. I think that's exactly the kind of game where you have to look at the players and just say, it wasn't working. Mistakes out on that pitch, they have to own up and take responsibility for them. Højbjerg, I'm sure he will. Sanchez made a few mistakes, and really unfortunately for him, Harry Winks came on and had the substitute appearance from hell, quite frankly. He looked rusty. He looked like a guy that hasn't been playing regularly in recent weeks. Um, so many heavy touches, including for that led to the Bernardo goal at the end. Um, Fortunately, it's going to be characterised, kind of summed up really with that horrible volleyed shot of almost the final kick of the game that went wide, almost hit the corner flag. There was one good cross, I think, that, I saw a little, I'm sure you've all seen it, there's a little compilation video doing the rounds today of kind of the low points. He did put in a good cross, I think, towards the end. I can't remember who it was. Maybe Kane, was it one Kane headed wide? But on the whole, everything was a little bit heavy. Everything was a little bit overhit, and it really wasn't. It wasn't a good advert for Harry Winks at all. I do start to wonder for Winks. I am not one who likes to criticise him. I am one that thinks there's a very good player in there that I saw boss it at the Bernabeu against Real Madrid and against Dortmund. I've seen him at Wembley against Liverpool looking absolute class above a few years back. And I just think he's got to find his exact role in a team, and it doesn't quite work for him alongside Højbjerg. And I do wonder, I'm starting to wonder whether for him, whether a restart in his career might end up coming in the summer, because he just can't kind of find his groove under Mourinho. And I think with Oliver Skipp coming back, who's been phenomenal, albeit in the Championship, but at 20 years old has been winning so many plaudits, and watching the way he plays in Norwich matches, you can kind of see how he'd slot in alongside Højbjerg. And I do wonder how much of an issue that's going to prove for Winks next season. When when Skipp returns, be very interesting to see how things kind of move. Maybe kind of watch this space with that one, because if he can't get a run of games and his form back by the end of the season, I'd imagine Winks will probably want to move on for the sake of his own career and obviously his England place as well. But yeah, it's kind of sad to see. And I see some people kind of almost delight in it because he's not a player they like. For me, it's just feel it really sad. A homegrown product who just came on and had a bit of a nightmare. Lots of players came. Like I say, Højbjerg didn't really cover himself in glory. So that's probably the first time I've really felt the guy needs a bit of a rest. It was a funny game. It really was. It's so difficult to analyse because I felt sorry for Guesty. Rob Guest was doing his player ratings yesterday. I didn't have to do them for a change. And he was saying to me, and I completely would be in the same scenario, there's so many players that have done so many good things, but there's also players that have had a bit of a mare, and sometimes it's the same player. So like Davinson Sanchez has been a real attacking threat, scored twice, but has had real issues at the other end. And there's other players, who have missed big chances, who have then gone on and had a good game for the rest of the game. It's a funny one. And I look at people like even Hugo Lloris. I forgot about Hugo Lloris. Hugo Lloris didn't have a great game either. He probably could have done better with a couple of the efforts, especially Calvert-Lewin's first one. Kind of almost just helped it on its way into the net. He really won't be happy with his performance, I've seen some people saying he should leave and stuff like that. It's just over the top rubbish. He's still a top goalkeeper who's bailed out Spurs on a number of occasions, even against West Brom at the weekend. Pulled off a really good save to stop it on the line. Just players are going to have the odd match where they don't hit the heights. It's about not letting it turn into a run of bad matches. But here, Moussa Sissoko came on. I just felt it was more of the same from Sissoko in an attacking sense. It's like we know what Sissoko's good traits are. It's helping with transitions. It's getting the team kind of covering for teammates at the back. But I just get this. It's kind of got worse. This thing of pushing him into an advanced role, asking him to carry the ball towards the edge of the area. And just watch the kind of deer in the headlights look on his face where he doesn't know what to do with that ball. Really valuable squad player, really good versatile guy that can do so much for the team. But he is not an attacking player. He hesitates, he panics a little when he's in possession in the final third, or even, I'd say, just kind of almost crossing the halfway line. It's just, you just know that the move is either going to break down or he's going to have to play a very safe sideways pass to someone. And that's not totally his fault. It's him being played in a position that's not his best. But yeah, I was a little bit disappointed with that. I didn't think Matt Doherty had the worst game in the world. I think he was great, but I felt it was important for him to get a little bit of, I suppose, just minutes under his belt. Mourinho said in the week that he'd had a really good conversation with him about Doherty. Admitted Spurs, they haven't seen the best of him yet. And both kind of manager and player kind of reaffirmed the fact that they do believe in each other. And it's just, as Mourinho said, some players like Højbjerg adapt really quickly and some players don't. And Doherty's just one of those, He's spent most of his career pretty much at one club, at Wolves, coming from Bohemians when he was very young. And it's a very new thing for him, being at Tottenham in a different role. And I felt he got up and down the pitch, in an attacking sense, linked up quite well. He's just got to find that balance. I feel like I'm using the word balance a lot at the moment. Harry Kane coming on, obviously, Mourinho would not have really wanted that to happen, or at least not for him to play an hour of football. Kane told him before the match that, he didn't really feel ready to start the game again so quickly after the West Brom match, having come back from those ankle problems. So, obviously, he didn't. And then, scored a good goal. Nice little stooped header from Son's cross. But then, it's not going to bode well for Saturday against Man City, him having played an hour. And it's kind of a bit similar to Dele Alli. Dele came on the pitch. It was only really meant to get 10-15 minutes. Went to extra time. Ended up getting about 45 minutes, which hopefully doesn't cause any counter, effects for him, because it's probably good for his body as long as he isn't, didn't get tired into the red zone where he's maybe causing more problems for himself. He looked, a bit like Winks, looked very rusty, looked like a player that hasn't played in a while. Obviously, any kind of stuff that he was doing wrong wasn't in areas where it was really going to cost Tottenham, but it wasn't a really good example of Dele Alli, was it? He's just come back. He'll need time. He'll need time and fitness, lots of work on the training ground, and hopefully, as I've said before, I do think Tanguy Ndombele being trusted now to play alongside Højbjerg in a deeper role frees up that number 10 spot for Dele Alli. It's his to kind of come out and claim, but he's got to do that. He's got to claim it. He's got to put in some performances that make it impossible for him not to be chosen. Thought Ndombele himself was a little bit mixed. Had some good moments, had some not so good moments. He looked a bit knackered towards the end, but he got another long shift in his legs. He's not coming off after the hour now, which is great to see. Such a weird match. It's such a weird match. It's like you want to be positive about certain aspects because there were positive aspects. And like I say, it was quite an enjoyable match. But ultimately, Tottenham are out of another competition that they could potentially win, which, any tiny, slim hopes of Premier League glory have probably faded away now. Pretty much definitely faded away now. But so that's Premier League and the FA Cup out, and that kind of leaves you that Carabao Cup final against the probably informed team in Europe right now. Obviously, they might not be in April, but you never know. And then obviously the Europa League. So it just depends how far Spurs go in that. But it's a funny one. It really is how you define your football. Like I say, some people define it with just enjoying the matches. Some people define it as silverware. That was why I think the Pochettino era was so difficult to quantify for people, because for myself, I fell into the camp of seeing huge improvement from the old Tottenham, and I could see Pochettino building a different foundation, a different level to then take Spurs on. Obviously, towards the end, it wasn't happening. It was stalling, and it needed a real shaking up, and ultimately it came really through Poch rather than the players. But I can also understand that there's some people that will look at the Poch here and say, well, he failed because he didn't win trophies. So many different ways of looking at football. I would say, I've kind of, there's three distinct camps there. I'm not in the first camp of, I just want to enjoy football, I don't care what happens. I wouldn't say I'm that at all, because like I say, there were some mediocre Tottenham teams in that late 90s, early 2000s or so, when it was not pretty. Well, this is the thing, it was pretty at times, but it really was just such a soft underbelly. It's the old Ferguson classic, or was it Roy Keane to Ferguson? Lads, it's Tottenham. And, then you've got the silverware camp. I think ultimately at the end of a career, I think people will be judged on silverware, especially with Spurs with the ambitions they have. I did really enjoy a lot of the Poch era. I love some of the football. I don't think I'd say I haven't seen anything in the Mourinho era yet to rival the football that prime Poch had us watching. The season when they're finishing seconds and thirds and stuff like that. I think some of the football played was wonderful. But ultimately, it didn't lead to anything. So we'll see. We'll see what's kind of to come. I think one thing that's clear, I think the players are playing for Mourinho. Any suggestions that Mourinho's lost the dressing room, I think's clearly not true. I think the players are definitely fighting for him and one another and trying to play football. I think it's going to be an incredibly tough night on Saturday night. Really, another game that I must admit I'm slightly happy that Rob Guest is going to be the man at, because it's up north his way. I'm going to cover it from the telly again because I've got a bad feeling about it. I think unless he can, I think this is the key thing with Mourinho, which he's been criticised for the defensive style, but I think it's pretty clear that he's been protecting that defence. Spurs have got the second best defence in the Premier League, despite all of those defensive problems. And a lot of that comes through the shielding they've had on the pitch, whether it be fullbacks not going up the pitch, both central midfielders sticking in front of the back four, or generally trying to protect that back line. I think that's probably a little bit of a feat in itself. But they're going to have to do that and then some against City, who are so in form at the moment. They absolutely are flying. Some of the football they're playing is so good. Another little side note we have to talk about is Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale wasn't at the match last night because he, in Mourinho's words, he obviously didn't play against West Brom at the weekend and then came into training on the Monday and informed them that he wanted to have a scan because he had some bad feeling in one of his muscles. So he went off, had that scan, and then decided that it would be better for him to work with the sports science staff for the coming days and not go to Goodison Park, which you can understand. Well, exactly how that would have gone down with Mourinho. Mourinho, anyone that's watched the Amazon documentary would have got a sense of that. He's not a guy that likes players. How do we put it in a polite way? He's not a fan of players not making themselves available for the team when he feels they should be able to. I think that was one of his gripes with Ndombele. That Ndombele used to pick up a lot of kind of niggling injuries that he felt he could play through. He's done this at other clubs as well. In the Amazon documentary, you probably saw, he wanted Son to play despite when he initially thought that the arm injury wasn't that bad, and obviously ended up being a fracture and he couldn't play. I think he even told some story about how he once played in goal himself with a broken arm or something like that. So this whole stuff about Bale, it's not a great signal. It's not. I think maybe when it's a permanent move and someone like Ndombele's got the time to turn it around, I do worry slightly with Bale, with the not so long amount of time left on this loan for this season, how that relationship is going. It's not a good sign when he's kind of taking pot shots at players, and he kind of very, very much made it of, I feel I need to say this kind of thing. It was a bit like, oh. And I think what doesn't help is that Bale's Instagram account, I'm not going to say Bale, but Bale's Instagram account put out good session after a training session. I think it was Monday. Is it Monday or Tuesday? One of the two. And I'm not saying this is the case in Bale's case, but what people don't always understand is that a lot of these players have their social accounts managed. Sometimes you see say Toby Alderweireld's one, which does have some home content on it as well, but he'll put up these graphics and you think, you should think, how in the world has he had time to come up with that incredible Photoshop job and all of that? And obviously, they're managed accounts. And I think someone brought it up on social media, and I must admit, I can't take it as gospel, but that apparently Bale said in an interview that he didn't even know the password to some of his accounts or something, which may be the case. I don't know, but that didn't work very well, did it? Saying that he'd had a good session, whoever was responsible for it, whether it was him or anyone that controls his accounts, saying that he had a good session, but actually, you know, obviously it's only Mourinho's side of events as well. This is the problem as well, is that we're not getting the chance to speak to Gareth Bale. Whether that's purely because he's been out injured, so he hasn't been available, whether it's the player not being too keen on doing media stuff, or whether it's the club not wanting him to do it, I don't know. But you can look and see, it's something that Mourinho said you have to ask the player, but we're not really getting that chance to ask the player. When he has played, he's not being one of the ones put up for interview. And like I say, it could be the player, it could be the club, but it would be lovely to just kind of get some explanation of events from his side on stuff. But yeah, that wasn't a good sign. Never a good sign when Mourinho's kind of sounding surprised about injuries is the best way to put it. I think I remember towards the end of last season, he said something about Ndombele having a knee injury that he picked up in training, but it's nothing serious. He'll be fine for the game. And Ndombele didn't come back for I think he missed the last 2 or 3 games of the season, and I think still had the problem coming into pre-season this time around. So, Mourinho and injuries is always one to watch. Got a last thing. I didn't want to make this an ultra long one because I think the game kind of spoke for itself in a big way. But I want to also mention Spurs have got a new arrival coming next month. We're outside the transfer window. It's not a player before you get overexcited. Not thinking it's that centre-back you dreamed of. It's how do they get exact title? Chief Commercial Officer. Todd Klein is coming in. And you might be thinking to yourself, oh my God, why is he telling us about Chief Commercial Officers? What do I care? Well, the reason is Todd Klein is coming in. He's going to look over across all commercial aspects of Tottenham Hotspur, which means more money. It means it's more money for the pot. It's more money to buy these players and things like that. But what's quite important is in his background, he brokered or spearheaded certainly the deal for the Miami Dolphins stadium naming rights. It was Hard Rock Cafe, 180 million over I think it was 15 years. I think it was 18 years. And he brokered that deal, which at the time was the 3rd highest in the NFL. And bearing in mind the Dolphins at that point were the 13th most valuable franchise in NFL, obviously that was quite the coup. So you know what I'm coming to next. Yes, part of his role will be trying to get naming rights for Tottenham Stadium. So he comes in with that pedigree. He starts next month. I think he was at a talent agency or something. I think Mike Keegan. Props to him as well. I think he's written a piece on that for the Mail. Mike Keegan's a very good journalist who's been out on a couple of the pre-season tours with me out to America and Asia 2 years ago, Shanghai and Singapore. Very good contacts, and it kind of all marries up nicely with the stuff I'd heard as well. So, and certainly I haven't, nothing's been denied, let's put it that way. So Todd Klein, starting next month, Chief Commercial Officer, you should see now a kick into gear of getting those stadium rights, naming rights done, which then, like I say, in a tough time for football clubs, that could be a lot of money coming into the club. Remains to be seen who it could be. It's obviously there's been talk about Amazon in the past, which would be a very new venture for them, but obviously have those close ties with Tottenham in the last year or two. So it'd be interesting to see kind of where that goes, but I think it can only be a good thing bringing in someone with his experience as well. So there you go. New arrival. Not probably the one you expected or really wanted, but it could actually be beneficial long term for Tottenham. So looking ahead, Man City obviously coming up next at the Etihad. Like I say, it's going to be so tough. City absolutely flying, playing beautiful football. Spurs are going to have to be. It's going to have to be the absolute antithesis of what we saw last night. It's going to have to be backs to the wall, 10, probably at least 10 players behind the ball, and just hope for those counter-attacks as they did at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium a couple of months back. Because if not, it could be something that we really don't want to be watching. And then after that, obviously, Wolfsburg are away in Austria. It's going to be probably the first time that I'm going to have 3 games I'm not going to be at the stadium, which is really weird. Obviously, I know you guys are not being able to go to stadiums at all at the moment, but I've been very fortunate to still be able to cover games. But I'm hoping to possibly be back for the West Ham game, depending on how kind of what press size area they have for that game. That's going to be a tough game as well. West Ham, playing very well. So I've kind of been heartened slightly in the attacking nature of Spurs stuff in terms of a little bit of confidence in the way they play going forward. It's just all about that defence. All about trying to plug it up because nothing's working. Alderweireld's not really working. Joe Rodon's not working. Eric Dyer certainly hasn't been working. Davinson Sanchez. I do always wonder, Japhet Tanganga, who was kind of discarded almost by Mourinho and told he's going to be a right back. Still a part of me that feels that he could be a really good centre back, but who am I? I'm just a bloke sitting in front of a wall that needs a good paint. But yeah, so I'm going to kind of head off there, not make it as long as normal ones, because like I say, I think the game did speak for itself on a lot of levels. But yeah, I'll be interested to see in the comments below. Let me know what kind of Spurs fan you are. Are you one that loves to just be entertained? Are you one that wants the trophies? Are you one that maybe like I was, that kind of saw where Poch was going and that just kind of had to be built upon? It may well be that Mourinho builds upon that. I think it's probably a hybrid, isn't there? Of all of them is probably the best way to go. But I totally understand that some people just want to enjoy their football. And certainly that was enjoyable, just didn't lead anywhere last night. So on that rather kind of strange, slightly down note, I'm going to sign off there. But as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you again soon.